coming back with another video for my profection series. This one's going to be on a 12th house profection. Again, I have done other videos on this, so go check them out if you want me to explain it a little bit more in depth. But essentially, profection year happens every year on your birthday. You'll have a new profection year. Now, the profection chart often looks like this. It's a wheel with heaps of numbers on the inside, which is the age. So if you look at the ascendant, and then there's the Mars, and then it goes like 0, 12, 24, as you can see, like the numbers going that way, but it goes around. And the numbers on the inside circles, they're all the ages, so the age of that year for you, for your birthday that you'd be turning. So I wanted to discuss this, but I'm going to use myself as an example and tell you a bit about my experience with this. Obviously, you need to look at your own chart because your experience will be a little bit different based on your planets and your chart, because that's your unique chart. However, there are normally common trends and themes that you will experience on a 12th house profection. Now, this is the 12th house profection I had back in 2014. I was 23, as you can see here. You can see 12th house activation, Pisces, Jupiter, and you can see all the stuff up there as well. It's highlighted, it's the orange, so you can see 12th house and the Jupiter symbol, and you can see all the age numbers there. Because I'm an Aries rising, it's in my Pisces 12th house using whole sign astrology, which is what you should use to use these techniques because they are more traditional, ancient styles of astrology. Now, firstly, I will point out that normally 12th house energy is to do with things like sleep, mental health, isolation, spending time alone. It can be very creative energy as well. It can be like moving abroad, doing things behind the scenes, that kind of energy. It can also be things like hospital, incarceration, mental health, as I said before, and hospitalization due to mental health, like all of those things where you're kind of like restricted or isolated or kind of alone. And it's not bad. These things can be good, or they can be a little bit more challenging. It just depends on the chart, the transits, and a lot of other things. It can be a very spiritual house as well. It can also be the house of the undoing. It can also be linked to like addictions and substances and those sorts of things as well. Escapism. And Pisces energy and Jupiter really do rule over that kind of creative, spiritual, fantasy energy, very psychic kind of energy as well. Now, to give you a bit of context, about a year before this chart was activated, I went through quite a challenging breakup. Mental health was quite challenged, but there was a lot going on. I was studying at uni, I was working about 2 or 3 different jobs, living out of home. As I said, had a bad breakup, and that all kind of led up to the events and the energy of this chart in 2014 when I was 23. But this was the year and the profection activation for me going traveling to Europe. I went to Europe for about a month, almost a month and a half. I did a top deck tour going all around Europe. We started off in London and we ended in London, but we added a few extra days so we could go to Ireland, so to Dublin for a few days. And it was amazing. I went with 4 of my friends from Tasmania, so there was like 5 of us. And one was from Melbourne, but most of us were from Tasmania. But there was 5 of us in total. We all went on this top deck tour. We had a great time. I went with one of my best friends, and then, as I said, some other friends that I was quite close with. I had an absolute amazing time. So this chart here started in June 2014. I went to Europe in September, like September the 1st, I think, or 2nd, I think September 2nd, I got on the airplane to start traveling to Europe. And that's really interesting because obviously that was quite early into this profection, like June, July, August, September. Went traveling for that like month and a half. Obviously I wasn't working, so I did leave my job and had to kind of rely on savings. So I did end up moving back to my mum's place after the traveling and got a new job and other things. But let's just stick to the traveling part because I think it really fits this Piscean energy, that Jupiter energy. So if you have a look at this, obviously, as I said, you'll see that when we're looking at this energy, I have to find out where Jupiter is in my actual natal chart because Jupiter is activated with this Pisces energy and the 12th house because my 12th house is ruled by Pisces, which means I need to look for Jupiter because Jupiter rules that 12th house and see where that is in my natal chart, because not only will that 12th house be activated for this year, but also wherever Jupiter sits. Now, in my natal chart, I'll just show you where it is. It's right there in my Leo 5th house using whole signs, conjunct Mars, and in a very loose conjunction with my Venus as well. So it's at 10 degrees in Leo. So that means that themes for this profection year are going to be 12th house themes that I just explained about, that spirituality, possibly drinking and intoxication and substances, also mental health and like that fantasy kind of energy, but also the 5th house, which can be sex, it can be partying, it can be like fun and risk taking, it can be romance and dating, it can be creativity and pleasure, so creative hobbies and activities, all that kind of stuff. It can also be children. Now, when I went traveling, obviously there was drinking and other substances, little bits and pieces of the way. Everything was done legally. I was of age and went to the right places, like in Amsterdam, went to the coffee shops or the cafes, all that kind of stuff. So didn't do anything illegal, but did try things. It was a top deck tour. We did have fun. We did party quite a lot, made a lot of friends. It was very, very fun. So I'm not surprised with that energy. And obviously Jupiter rules my 9th house as well of travel. So you can see those themes of like travel, fun, partying, all that kind of energy. So a lot of the start of this profection year, so like that June to September time frame, was the build-up preparation for this big anticipated trip to Europe. As you can imagine, a month and a half trip with a bunch of friends is so exciting. Obviously, it costs a lot of money, so we did save quite a fair bit. I think I had to save about 5,000 or 6,000 Australian dollars to cover flights, the top deck tour, and like money that I would need over there to do things. And I think I stuck to about a $6,500 budget in total. I think that's how much everything cost. And I actually did come home with money. But as you can imagine, when someone had been living out of home previously, also working 2 to 3 jobs and studying full-time at university, it was really hard for me to save up that money, because the jobs I was working was being a waitress, working at Supre at like a fashion retail store, and just like those hospitality jobs, which are great, but they're not high-paying jobs. They're obviously like retail and hospitality jobs, and they were very minimal hours in between university studies. And obviously the cost of living out of home, even if you do go into a share house, it's very, very expensive. So it did take me a while to save up this money, and I did have support from my family, because I obviously, had to leave my job, because most jobs aren't going to hold for a month and a half while you go traveling. So I did have to leave my job, which there was stuff going on with the different jobs that I had anyway. So it wasn't a massive deal. But we did have to obviously leave my rental, and then I did move back home with my parents for a short period of time while I was figuring stuff out after this holiday. But it was one of the best things that I ever did, and even still to this day, the memories that I have from that trip are phenomenal, and I'm so grateful. And then the next profection year was when I met my husband. So that was really important as well, but we're obviously focusing on this one. But as I said, there was such a big build up to this trip, because as you can imagine, being a 23-year-old, going on this big, massive holiday, saving so much money, investing, going with your friends, it was like a dream come true, and it was really, really fun. And you can tell that this was a really big pivotal life moment for me because of how many planets were activated. So because we're dealing with the 12th house, that Jupiter and Pisces energy, because Jupiter's conjunct Mars and Venus, and both Mars and Venus rule 2 houses in my chart. Jupiter rules 2 houses in my chart, and this Jupiter is also in an opposition with Saturn, and Saturn rules 2 houses in my chart. This is activating a lot in my chart overall. So based on that alone was pretty crazy. And during this profection year, I was also coming up for that Jupiter return. So I was also starting to prep for that 12-year Jupiter return, which is an amazing thing, which usually brings lots of abundance and luck and blessings and happiness in that 5th house of like fun, pleasure, dating, romance, which is obviously led on to not long after my Jupiter return, which was in the next profection year, and part of this one, where I met my husband. But for the rest of this profection year, it was really amazing. I think I had a lot of fun. I worked a lot on the gym and a PT, which is because that Mars is my chart ruler. I also spent a lot of time getting a new job and working at a gym called Zap Fitness. So overall, it was a big year on like friendships, fun, partying, going to parties with my friends, going out drinking, traveling. It was an amazing year. So this profection year was pretty much all about fun, pleasure.